We are live. Welcome to another great session with iSpring's Leadership Series. And today we're going to talk about presentations, something I think all of us need to work on in our, whether it's e-learning, whether it's sales presentations. And Simon, we are so excited to have you here. And so I don't go down the wrong path because there's so many interesting things to talk about. Can you first tell us who you are and where you work and what you do?
So much to share, Gina. Thank you very much. So, of course, we're speaking from the UK, which is where Eyeful Presentations, my business, is based. We're all rather giddy and excited because you probably guessed the sun has come out. It's the first time it's happened in the last 12 months. That's what you get when you work with iSpring.
That's right. The sun comes out.
Exactly. So, yeah, Eyeful Presentations was founded about 11 years ago, and 11 years ago I had the rather the frustration had built up, having worked in corporate business for a long time, that presentations simply weren't good enough. And so the big thing was 11 years ago was to try and break that horrible cycle that people have found themselves in, which is death by PowerPoint. And we've all been on the receiving end of it, and awful presentations and really boring, meandering, non-focused presentations. So 11 years ago I went out. I thought the best way to fix bad presentations was initially to make them look better and make them look prettier, and then very quickly realized that you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still very much a pig. So we then started digging a little bit deeper and realized that the root cause of most bad presentations was not the design or the aesthetics, even though they're really important and we're really good at them. The big thing was actually making sure that people had a story to tell, and they told it in a way that really engaged their audience. And that's kind of what we ended up doing. And
yeah, and Eyeful Presentations was born. And Simon Morton goes down in history as bringing fun out and all things great happen to our presentations. And yeah, we're excited because we have lots of great questions for you. And speaking of questions, if anyone in the audience, hopefully, definitely use the question, the Q&A area on our Hangout to type in your questions that are relevant to our topic today, presentations in e-learning, or presentations in general, really. But you can put those questions in, and we'll bring those out, and I'll be watching that. And if you have any problems, like you can't hear us or something, definitely throw that into the Q&A area because I'll be monitoring that. But all that housekeeping aside, Simon, this is very exciting to get going. And it's exciting. Your company was born 11 years ago, and you said it was the same time your daughter was born. Is that right?
That's right. And it's kind of crazy. It's always in retrospect, you look back and you go, really? What was I thinking? So Beth was a bump at the time. She's my eldest. And around that time, I was in a wonderful job, working with people who were friends as well as people I respected. I kind of ticked every box you could think of, but I was also traveling a lot, and I had that horrible sense that Beth was going to arrive in our lives, and I'd fall into that horrible trap of kissing her goodnight on a Sunday evening, and then reacquainting myself with her on a Saturday morning. And I didn't want that to happen. So why my wife agreed to this, I'll never know. I don't think she really understands it either. Probably something to do with baby brain. But she said, yeah, go for it. And that was the idea. And from the back bedroom, it just grew and grew. We're now dotted around the world. We've got about 35 people at the last count. Most of them are based here in the UK. That's where we do our delivery. It's where our design team are based, where our training team is based, even though we train globally. And then we have our consultancy team who are out working with clients, normally on site, talking to them about their stories, based in the UK, but also the States, Ireland, just working my way around the globe, Holland, Germany, and Russia. So yeah, lots of Eiffelites going out there and trying to improve.
And you're bringing great design to the world.
That's the idea, slide by slide.
That's right. Taylor, I think I cut you off. You go ahead. I know you had a question for him.
Yeah, so we'll start off with some of our great questions we have for you. We're excited to hear kind of what you have to say about the presentations. So you wrote a book. It's called The Presentation Lab. And
there it is.
There it is. In the flesh. Yeah, so it's been it's about challenging what people think they know about presentations right now and creating it. And so our first question is just, you say that great design is the last thing you need, and that's the opposite, or the last thing you need to worry about. And that's the opposite of what people usually tend to think when they're making these presentations. You think great design equals great presentation. And so if you just expand on what you mean by that's the last thing you need to worry about.
Well, it probably is a little bit of a paradox, because you're right, there are some fantastic books out there that talk really eloquently about the importance of presentation design. And design is very important within a presentation. But in my view, the worst bit of feedback you can get, worst bit of positive feedback you can get from a presentation, be you pitching to a potential client or presenting to an internal group or training or what have you, the worst thing anybody in that audience can say is great slides. Because you're really not being judged, and hopefully you shouldn't be judged, on your ability to make PowerPoint or Keynote or Prezi really zing. That's not them. Prompts them to do something ideally with that message. Yeah, I'm very much a strong believer that if you're not asking your audience to do something as a result of your presentation, you probably shouldn't be presenting in the first place. It's rare, even just a simple information share. The reason you're sharing information is to prompt somebody to do something as a result. So we talk a lot about sort of the three key elements of a presentation, and they are message, content, and design. And to your point, I think you made it brilliantly, is most people, when they're asked to create a presentation, run around like a headless chicken, wondering what template to use, what font they can get away with, what color scheme, and what slides they can borrow from their friends and family to try and bulk out the presentation. What they should be doing is actually stepping away from the computer completely, getting a piece of paper and just figuring out what they want their audience to do, what they want their audience to remember, not 5 minutes, but 5 days after that presentation. And once you've nailed that, that's your message, then everything else is really simple and easy to come by. The message is difficult. Getting to a really clear message is not a walk in the park, but once you have that, the content kind of picks itself. And that's one of the things I love about starting with the message, is that content is the stuff that gums up your presentation. Most death by PowerPoint comes from the fact that people have put loads of content in there just in case, because then maybe they might have a question on this really sort of insignificant part of the story, but I better put it in there just in case. And so it becomes slide after slide after slide of content. And then once you've got your message, once you've got your content, then you can go to town, and if you've got any time left, make your slides look amazing. But yeah, one of the things we consistently say to our clients is you can get away with a shabby looking presentation with a strong message and a clear call to action. What you can't do is get away with a gorgeous, slick looking presentation that leaves your audience confused. There's no point in that presentation in the first place.
That is a great point. And you use a term in your book called heart mapping. What?
Oh, it's heat mapping. Sorry, heat mapping.
Oh, heat mapping. I put heart mapping.
I quite like heart mapping.
I guess your heart has to be in it to exude the heat.
I missed the trick there, didn't I?
When you're writing or when you're putting together a presentation, what is heat mapping?
So heat mapping is a tool to prompt people to think about the most important stakeholder in the entire process, and that's the audience. There is no presentation without an audience, and you'd be amazed at how many people kind of sleepwalk from one presentation to another in terms of presenting. So sales teams equip, or rather sales leaders equip their teams with the generic sales deck, without really any consideration that meeting 1, meeting 2, and meeting 3 are dealing with completely different sorts of audiences, and they're kind of hoping that this generic message will stick with that audience. And so what the heat mapping process does is it gives people an opportunity to kind of break down and plan their presentation based on their audience. And And the thinking around this is pretty straightforward. We try to keep it really simple, really just to prompt that moment to think about your audience in the first place. So it's really easy to go, oh, if I'm presenting to a finance audience, I better make sure there's lots of facts and lots of numbers in there, because that's what the finance guys like. And if it's marketing, let's make sure it's lots of sort of colourful, big picture graphics.
Shiny.
And people make these awful assumptions and these sort of stereotypes around these different audiences, where actually your audience is unique, and you've got to kind of pull upon what you know about them, where you are in the stage of engagement with them. Is this the first time you've spoken to them? Is it the 10th time you've spoken to them? Because that will impact the way that you engage with them. I'll share with you a very quick story of a client we were working with, and they were preparing a really important bid presentation. And their audience was procurement, it was banking, and it was finance guys. And some technology people in there as well. So in terms of breaking the heat map down, you would have thought very factual in the content. But actually the heat map's made up of 3 elements. One is factual, one is visionary, so big picture stuff, and the other one is emotional. And we started the workshop, we started developing the story for this audience, and what came through was we weren't really feeling excited about the message we were pulling together. We asked a couple of questions, and actually these guys knew their audience pretty well. And they didn't need to share the facts, the pricing, the run rates of the software or any of that stuff, because the audience already knew that. They would have bored them if they reiterated the same old stuff. What that audience wanted to know at that stage of the sales process was that they could trust the presenter to live up to their promises, that they could pick up the phone at 2 o'clock in the morning when everything was going haywire and know that they would have their back. And so we turned it from a very factual presentation into an emotional presentation, and that immediately engaged the audience on their terms, because that's what they were looking to get from that meeting. So it's about putting your audience first. That's the most important thing.
That's great. That's such a great, the story really illustrates how important that is, to think individually of that audience. And we've already had, and hopefully I'll pronounce it right, Joao Pinto asked to see the book one more time. We want to know the title.
Bless you, Joao.
The sun was blindness. There's the Presentation Lab.
Is that what that thing in the sky is? Sun? We've heard about it.
Strange ball of fire.
That's the English version. Rather excitingly, this is the Korean version.
Oh, wow.
I know. And there's Spanish, Russian, Chinese coming out, and in very short orders as well. So yeah, that's kind of
exciting.
It's very exciting. I've gone through this and I can't spot any typos, but
I think you need to send it to me to edit. I'll edit it for you.
They could be saying anything with my name on it.
You have to trust them. That's called trust. And Paulina, thank you. Paulina put the link to your book in the answer there, so that's helpful.
Fantastic. Thanks, Paulina.
Yeah. What about inserting a Nielsen table in a slide? Would you recommend that?
This kind of picks up on how you use the tools appropriately. So again, in the book, we talk a lot about using the correct tools at the right time. So PowerPoint is sort of the de facto standard for most people when they think about presentations. And when I speak at seminars and conferences, I'll ask people to put their hand up if the first thing they think of when you say presentations is PowerPoint, and the vast majority of people do. Yeah. Sometimes if you're presenting a lot of data, PowerPoint isn't the right tool. And maybe if you're presenting a lot of data to a small group, maybe you want to be thinking about printing off that table and sat around a table working through those numbers with people. Just because it has the tag presentation doesn't mean it has to be PowerPoint.
I agree.
You can drag some of the detail up, and you can talk at a high level about some of the major messages, and then refer people to the handout. Maybe utilizing something like an iPad to allow you to drill down. There are lots of different ways of taking data-heavy content and manipulating it in a way that's most engaging to the audience.
Yeah, I would say in a presentation, you're what you're using is a visual aid, and most people forget that that's really what it's intended to do, is aid your presentation, not become solely your presentation. And when you put so much up there that you're having to read and people can't see, and then presenters have to say, I know you can't see this from back there. You know,
yeah.
Stop already. Yeah, so that is...
No, we've all been there. So I think it kind of goes back to that idea of what type of presentation is it? Is it a formal presentation where it's kind of a one-way conversation, it's kind of a broadcast, or are you looking to interact with your audience? And that can work really well with smaller groups. And if that's the case, then look at other tools. And hard copy is great. Whiteboard is a fantastic way of sharing really key messages and getting your audience involved, all the way through to some more informal ways of doing it, kind of back of a napkin stuff. If anybody's read any of Dan Rome's books, which are fantastic, really, really good for that informal, engaging presentation. So a whole heap of different ways of sharing it.
And Miguel now says that he was kidding basically about the charts, but Miguel, it might be a joke question, but
you know what?
It happens too often.
That's right. So many people have. That's the thing. I mean, the wonderful thing is underpinning all of that is we've never had it so good as presenters. We have so many tools available to us, and so many different ways of engaging with our audiences. We would be doing ourselves and our audiences a massive disservice if all we ever do is stick to PowerPoint.
Yeah, that's a great point. What are some of the? Oh, sorry, Taylor.
Well, no, so basically you've already given us so many great tips through the questions and through the thing, but your book is filled with a lot of great tips on what to do and what not to do in your presentation, but you have just kind of a simple breakdown of maybe some practicals for people, just simple practicals saying what you should and shouldn't do in a presentation.
Yeah, I mean, the book's very focused on the creation of a presentation, and there are so many soft skills, things that you should and shouldn't do, and I'm probably the worst person to ask because I probably break most of those rules. My view has always been, and it's never really changed over the last 11 years, is that the fact that a presentation, people have so many rules set around presentations. One of the myths that we break, or attempt to break in the book at least, is the fact that there are set formats. You can only use 7 slides and this, that, and the other. And depending on who you ask, sort of any slide deck more than 15 slides is a heinous crime, and all of that is complete bunkum. Ultimately, it's about finding the right connection between you, the presenter, and the audience. And you're absolutely right. Yeah, when you say whatever you've got behind you is a visual aid, and the more confidence you have, the more passion you feel for your message as a presenter, the better that thing behind you is going to be, because frankly that's just there to support you. That's kind of the punctuation of your story, but you're the story. And I've spoken to many people who say the best presentation they ever did was when the projector died, and they just kind of spoke from the heart. And it's scary but true, and it's one of the things that we say to our clients a lot is, don't rely on your presentation, your PowerPoint presentation deck to do your job for you. You as the presenter really have to know this stuff. And I think that the vast number of presentations that are kicking around, and the quote is 30 million PowerPoint presentations are created every day, kind of crazy. The vast majority of those don't need PowerPoint. The vast majority of those are just defaulted to PowerPoint because people feel they need something, otherwise it's not a grown-up proper presentation.
That's a good point. And I know, a lot of times people use PowerPoint almost as a crutch because they sit and type out everything they want to say and then they just put it on a slide. And it's like, okay, you're not creating a book. You're creating, make the visual and then you speak, or use two separate presentations. One if you're going to email it to someone and they need the text, and one that if you're speaking that it's behind you. And a great question Gwen brought up, Gwen wanted to know what are some tips for incorporating video clips into presentations?
I like video in presentations, but I've got this kind of like 2-minute rule when it comes to utilising video, purely because if it helps you tell the story, great. If it helps illustrate a particular message, great. But it shouldn't take more than 2 minutes to do that. In the end, if your presence, sticking a 5-minute video on is kind of a cop-out, and also I've always felt kind of uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for the audience because they're kind of all sat watching TV with you, and this is kind of a bit weird. So it's good as an illustration, and also a lot of people use video incorrectly in my mind. People use video to what we call hammock within a presentation. So if things are getting kind of a bit dry, 20 minutes in, I need something to boost it, let's put a video in. And they'll find something off YouTube. There might be a cat falling off a kitchen surface, anything, just to go.
Didn't you always have a cat video, though? I thought that was somewhere written in a rule.
Kind of obligatory, yeah, exactly. That's for afterwards. You know what I mean? It's sort of people do tend to find find video clips and go, that'd be a great way to wake people up. If you're going through that thought process when creating your presentation isn't good enough.
Right.
It's simple as that.
Yeah, and I think that goes to any visual, anything you're putting in. I always use the rule of thumb of make everything justify its existence.
Absolutely.
Just look at every slide, look at every picture, look at every video clip, and make it justify being there. And if it does, if you need it to make that point, great. If you're saying, well, it could be a good stretcher if I need to spend the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's probably very common sense. Do you think there are any, what are some of the new innovations out there that you're seeing in the world of presentations? Any good and exciting ones?
Yeah, I mean, Prezi's been around for a while now, and it's interesting. We're fortunate enough to work with companies all over the world, so we kind of seen Prezi move round the globe. So 2 years ago, whenever I was working in Holland, Holland loved Prezi. It's kind of sort of had its time there now, and I think it's sort of settled where it needs to, which is it's one of a whole bunch of tools. For a while, people were going, PowerPoint is evil, Prezi is wonderful. And I don't think it's that black and white. I think actually
we got dizzy. Too many moving parts in Prezi for some people, and we all got dizzy.
Well, there's that. There's also the fact that it's a great tool for certain things and a plain awful tool for others. Exactly like PowerPoint, exactly like Keynote, and all the other tools that are out there. Some are great for certain things, and for other things they're plain awful. So Prezi, when used well, I think still is probably the most exciting thing that's happened to the world of presentations for a long time. And I also really, and this is not me being obsequious here, but I do think the stuff that iSpring are doing in terms of taking PowerPoint content and then allowing people to repurpose it in ways such as converting out to HTML5, such as being able to take that PowerPoint file, add a voiceover, export out in lots of different ways, that I think is really, really powerful. Because we talk a lot about repurposing. If your story is strong, if you've got your story in it, and it has been created as a PowerPoint presentation, it shouldn't just sit on the server gathering dust. There are lots of different ways you can then use that as a cut-down version to send out post-presentation rather than having a whole bunch of notes up there. Share it. Make it part of this ongoing engagement that you have with your audience. Adding stuff to websites, all of that stuff. So I do think that PowerPoint and Keynote and all of those things that can be repurposed and utilizing solutions like yours just gives everybody the opportunity to make more of what they've built.
That's great. And actually, Miguel had a great bundle that we can bundle Prezi with Dramamine. And that would be sold to audiences everywhere. I think that's brilliant. Brilliant marketing.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we had time for one more question for you. Taylor, I'll let you grab that last one.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things people say about presentations. There's presentation myths. Are there any big myths about presentations that you've kind of seen and been able to debunk or want to debunk here today?
Yeah, well, some of the myths, there's a lot of stuff, as you say, Taylor, talks about presentations. I think if I can name check one particular book and author, there's a guy called Gar Reynolds, who's written a number of books around the theme of presentation Zen. Gar is brilliant. His books are brilliant, and if you're on Amazon and Barnes & Noble buying my book, I strongly suggest you also buy Gar's as well, because it's brilliant. The myth that's come off the back of Gar's work is that people kind of read it a bit like Cliff's Notes. So they'll flick through, and there's some very nice visuals there of very sparse slides with some beautiful high-res imagery on them, and maybe 2 or 3 words. And people go, oh, great, that's it. That's what a Zen presentation is. It's high-impact, high-gloss images with a couple of words in an interesting font. If I do that, my presentation will be brilliant. It won't. It'll be prettier, but until you've got that strong story in place, all you're doing is just is kind of taking any structure that you had out and replacing it, art for art's sake type of thing. It's the aesthetics have taken over. In the end, the presentation needs to be measured on the fact that there's an information exchange between you, the presenter, and the audience.
Content.
And the other sort of myth I'd mentioned, because everybody talks about it, is that PowerPoint is evil, and it's not. PowerPoint is as evil as the user, and there are very few evil users out there, but it's a great tool when it's used properly, as is Keynote, as are all the other things out there. And what's interesting is that PowerPoint, for some bizarre reason, has really copped it in terms of being seen as the evil piece of software, accused of dumbing things down, accused of NASA disasters, all sorts of dreadful, dreadful things. People don't blame Word for bad copy in articles or badly written scripts or any of those things. People don't blame Excel because calculations haven't gone well, because they recognize it's down to the user. PowerPoint is no different, and that's one of the things. So rather than dismiss PowerPoint because it's supposed to be awful, actually just use it better.
Yeah, what's that saying? Bullets don't kill people. Too many bullets on PowerPoint kill people.
Correct. That's exactly it.
Yeah, I think that is one of the big myths out there, is that PowerPoint is so bad, and it's really just the users not knowing how to correctly use it. So we all need to get your book, and then have you come out and work with our teams.
God bless you.
To create better presentations. Yeah, let's see that book one more time.
It is. I can't take any credit for the look and feel. The guys here in the studio created it. So if you're looking at that going, it looks gorgeous, nothing to do with me whatsoever. It's Phil and Alex. They did it.
They did it.
Yeah.
Well, Eyeful Presentations. There's the ones to call and the ones to have, get that content, get that book. I think, again, it's a service to all who have to sit in audiences everywhere around the world. Please, everyone, start creating better presentations. We want to leave feeling like it was really worth our time being in a training or in a presentation somewhere, is that we want to walk away feeling like that was a great presentation with actionable items I can implement immediately into my work and into my life. And, oh, they had some nice slides as well.
And that's the measure. Spot on.
Yeah. Well, Simon, this has been really, really fun and very enlightening, and I know our audience got a lot of great content. How can they get a hold of you? Where can they find you if they want to contact you?
Oh, that would be lovely. Twitter. Our Twitter handle is at Eyeful Pres, so EYEFUL Pres. That's a good way of doing it. Or you can check out the website, which is Eyeful Presentations, so EYEFUL Presentations, all one word, .com.
Great. Simon, thank you so much, and we are looking forward to learning more about Eyeful Presentations.
Thanks so much for allowing me to chunter on for half an hour. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And look, the sun is now going away. Our time.
My time with iSpring is finished, I can tell.
That's right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and listening, and we will get this replay up so you can watch it again and again, or maybe send it to someone that you know needs to watch this presentation and make better presentations. Yeah, just secretly send them the link. But thank you, everyone. Until next month, have a wonderful, wonderful time creating great presentations.